Okay, guys, what's up? It's Astro here, and we are going to talk about consistency in decks, how to build a deck, the starter guide, what you should be looking for in terms of what makes a deck good, what cards should I be using in a deck, and how can I use these to make the most effective deck at a beginner level. We're going to go by a step-by-step process. We're going to go with what I look for in a deck. We're going to talk about finding drawing power versus search cards, and we're going to talk about how all search cards and how all draw power is not created equal. Okay, this is going to be, we're going to go step by step, and we're going to make a meta deck essentially with me, and we're going to go through my decision making with it. So we're running heroes. So the cards that we're going to be using are Elemental, Destiny, and Vision heroes. There's no evil heroes in this game yet. Konami, please let me give you my money. We'll hope. But right now we're looking at the characters who use heroes. Usually if you connect the character to the archetype of the type of character they use, they have skills that aid you in duels. So we're looking at heroes. We're looking at characters like Jaden Ubel. We're looking at characters like Aster Phoenix. And we're looking at characters like Jaden Yuki. Okay, they all have skills that'll help you throughout duels to get to what you need to win games. Now, luckily, I have a fusion hero deck on Jaden. Oh yeah, no, this was for a challenge. Okay, this is for a challenge. We're knocking this one out. We're gonna start off with a blank deck on Jaden Yuki. And we're gonna talk about how we can build a hero deck to be the aggressive OTK heroes that you see on the ladder. Right now, when it comes to what you first should look for when you're looking at making a deck, right, is you want to find ways to get to your win condition as often as possible with as little friction as possible, right? You want to make sure that no matter what hand you draw, or if in the best case situation, no matter what hand you draw, you can always get to what you need to get to win the duel in the amount of time that your deck kind of has allowed to you. So we're talking about heroes. We understand the archetype is very aggressive. It's very kind of all or nothing. So you want to get to that win con turn one now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna first look at the hero archetype. I'm just gonna put in hero, right? And we see over here we have all of our fusion cards, these would be our win conditions. And this we're gonna be using mass heroes, which is the most popular variant that I believe does the best job of getting to kills the fastest, right? So the card that's infamous for it is Mass Hero Anki. What we're gonna talk about is what Mass Hero Anki does and why it makes it such a good win condition. So, as you can read in the effect, it must be special summon with mass change. And I'll give you the short and skinny of it. The card can attack your opponent directly at the cost of it being half damage. So instead of swinging for 28, it's going to be swinging for 1400. But if it attacks directly when there's nothing on the board, it's just a normal attack. It'll swing for 28. Now, when this card destroys a monster by battle, you get to add a mass change quick play spell, which would be right here. Right, a mass change quick play spell, which will allow you to special summon another Anki to search again, because it's not a once per turn. It is a once per turn on this card, but it's not a hard once per turn. So you get to add a mass change quick play spell. You get to summon another Anki, swing again. If it destroys another monster, you get to add another mass change quick play spell, and then you get to summon another Anki and swing again. You can understand how this can build consistent kills if you build the deck around getting this monster on the board. Now, how do we go about getting the monsters on the board to facilitate these one-turn kills? Well, we have cards that get you out your monsters that you need, right? We're going to talk about Vision Hero Ferris, and we're going to talk about Stratos. These are both search cards, but they're search cards of a different variety, right? Vision Hero Ferris, and this is where we're going to first take our first look at how search power is not created equal in the slightest, okay? Vision Hero Ferris is a card that allows you to special summon from the hand, which is really good. You don't use your normal summon on summoning Ferris. You get to pitch a hero to the graveyard, which allows you to unbrick your hand, which we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of consistency. It allows you to unbrick your hand and essentially discard a hero, and you get to special summon it to the board, and once it hits the board, you activate this effect to grab another Vision Hero monster, which would be Vision Hero Increase, which would be this young boy right here. Now, once Increase gets special summoned, he gets set to the spell and trap card zone. He gets to tribute over a hero, and then he himself gets to special summon himself, and then he special summons another Vision Hero. Right? So we'll add him, right? And now we're going to connect. You're going to start connecting the dots with me as we do this. That Vision Hero is going to be Vion. Okay, now Vion's effect allows you to, one is special or normal summon, you get to send one hero monster from your deck to the graveyard, right? We'll learn about that target in a second. And within the same turn, you can banish one hero monster from your graveyard to add a polymerization. Now, what we just did is we went search, into special, into search, into special, and now we added a card to our hand, right? So now we're going to connect the dots, and this is how you can go about building your decks. If you're a beginner, I suggest you read your card effects, see what they do, and you start connecting the dots of how you would go through the combo, right? So as we just talked about before I go and add the polymerization, right? We play Ferris. Ferris pitches a hero. We're going to have heroes all across the board. That's not going to be a problem. Ferris is going to pitch a hero to special summon itself. Ferris is going to grab a vision hero that can then hopefully you add one that goes to spell and trap card zone, which would be increase, right? Increase is going to play into your spell and trap card zone. You're going to use increase to tribute over the Ferris, which then increase will special summon itself. Okay. After increase special summons itself, it's going to activate its effect. It's going to grab Vion. Vion will then be special summoned to the field. So you went from one monster on the board to now you have two. Okay. And this all started from one card, which would be Vision Hero Ferris, technically two if you count the monster that you pitched. So you use two cards start, Ferris and another hero, and now you have Vision Hero increase with Vion on the board. You get to pitch a monster. Once Vion's on the field, Vion gets to send an elemental hero or a hero monster to the graveyard to then banish a hero, which you have Ferris in there. You don't need Ferris anymore. You banish Ferris, and you get to add one polymerization to your hand. Now, if you were paying attention, you now know that what you have on board is you still have two cards in hand. If this was your first turn, or you went first, if you went first, this is still your first turn. You have two monsters on board. You have polymerization in hand. You have a monster in a grave. If you're turn 2, you now have 3 cards in hand. You have 2 monsters on board, and you have polymerization in hand, right? And this all started off the 2 card start of Ferris and another hero. Now, let's talk about how this, leading into this, can help you get to the kill. If you notice, Anki needs to be, you have to, for mass change to operate, we're going to make sure we put the mass changes in here. For mass change to operate properly, we need it to, you can only special summon a monster from the extra deck if you target a hero of the same attribute. Anki is a dark hero, so we need to have a dark target. Vision heroes are all dark. Ferris is dark, Increase is dark, Vion is dark. So now, if per se your opening hand had the mass change in it, right? You now have 2 monsters on board that can be your mass change target with a polymerization in your hand. And with the target of Vion that we sent to the graveyard, right, you'll now have a 3rd dark monster on board. And that monster is going to be very important, is Destiny Hero Malicious. So we'll look up Malicious right now. And as you can see, we have 2. And we're going to read Malicious's effect as to why he is the target for Vision Hero Vion, right? You can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 Destiny Hero Malicious from your deck. So, you have 1 Malicious in grave, okay, because you sent it with Vion. You have another one in the deck. This Malicious is going to banish itself to grab this Malicious and play it on board. So now you went from 5 cards in hand. You pitched 1 with Ferris, right? Ferris got you the Increase. Increase got you the Vion. Vion sent the Malicious to the graveyard. Malicious banished itself to play another Malicious. So now you have access to whatever your other 3 cards in your hand were, but now you have 3 monsters on board plus a polymerization. And we'll talk about what you're going to use this polymerization for in the alternate win condition. That's what makes, and that will lead us into what makes some decks better than others. So, I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, okay, Astro, we have the Ferris combo. Ferris combos into Increase, which combos into Vion, which sends Malicious, which gets us the Malicious, which gets us the polymerization with 3 monsters on board. What Stratos do? And this is where we talk about how searches are not created equal. Ferris gets to search a Vision hero, specifically, and put it in the spell or trap card zone. Stratos, upon normal summon, he has 2 effects. You can either destroy spell or trap cards on the field up to the number of hero monsters you control, except for this card. So it doesn't count itself. So if you just play Stratos by itself, it can't destroy anything. Okay, if you play Stratos with 2 other cards, you can destroy 2 cards. Math, you guys understand. Or you get to add 1 hero monster from your deck to your hand. So what does this card search mean? This card is a very powerful search for the elemental heroes because he can grab anything in here, essentially, right? Now you're not going to want to grab this or this, right? And this is where we're going to talk about there's cards that you don't want to see. But let's say your starting hand is, you have Stratos, you got Mass Change, you got Malicious, and you got, we'll say, 2 other cards. You draw 2 other cards or whatever. So you have your 5, your opening 5. 1, 2, 3, blah blah. Okay. You play Stratos. Stratos is going to grab Ferris, and then Ferris can start the combo from there, right? This understands the power. Ferris can't get you Stratos to start off your combo, which you wouldn't need because Ferris is the combo starter. But Stratos allows you to search out whatever card you need to get the combo going. Even better, if you don't have any cards that you want to pitch, so let's say, or if you don't have any cards you can pitch, but you start with, you start Stratos, you start Ferris, you start Mass Change, and you start like maybe double Treacherous. Stratos can search you a card that you can pitch to the graveyard with Ferris. You can understand how this card can be considered a crux of the deck, right? He's a starter. He's a starter for anything. He allows you to get to your win condition in case you don't see the card that will fuel, essentially, right? This card is the engine, right? He's the engine. He starts the car. This card is the starter in case the engine doesn't work, if that makes sense, right? He's going to work in a manner that he's going to get it started for you in case this card betrays and isn't in the opening hand. Now, we're going to talk about optimal builds in a later video, but for right now, I just want you guys to understand the idea of what makes decks run and what makes decks better than others in terms of how they run. Now, continuing on, right, is we have our combos. If we don't start out with Ferris, or you start out with Stratos summons to get Ferris. Ferris then pitches a card, and he goes through the whole combo that we talked about before, ending with Polymerization, Malicious on field with Increase, and Vion. Now, as we said before, heroes are very much a turn 2 deck. Heroes want to get out, get on board, and get damage out so they can kill you, essentially, right? And making sure that, I'm going to put these 2 fusion monsters in here for right now. Essentially, they want to make sure that you die turn 1. They want to kill you turn 1, and they want to empty out the ammo. If you think about the different types of aggression within decks, you want to think about heroes as like a rocket launcher, essentially. They're sent, they have one shot, they shoot it. If you blow up, they win. But if you don't, they're probably gonna lose, right? As other decks, like say Cyber Dragons, would be the same type of aggression, but they're kind of more like a machine gun, right? You can fire off a couple shots, right? But just because you didn't get them the first time doesn't mean that you're out of ammo and you cannot proceed further. You have other plays. Now, heroes also have ways to set up turn 2 plays, but they're nowhere near as strong as Cyber Dragons, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the aggressive decks or the more aggro decks in a different video later on. So for right now, we're going to talk about how if you don't have the turn 2 play to kill, how you can have a turn 1 play to set up and try and protect yourself. Now, this is essentially the talk of how many alternate win conditions do we have in heroes. Now, you guys saw me add 2 cards to the deck, which would be Vision Hero Adoration and Vision Hero Trinity. So these are the fusion monsters, actual fusion monsters. Anki is considered a fusion monster, but you don't actually fuse for it. You just hit a card with Mass Change and it transfers up, right? But Polymerization is actually used to make Adoration and Trinity. And Trinity is a card that can attack 3 times on monsters, and it doubles its attack the turn it summons. So the card goes to 5,000 before it swings, right? And it can swing up to 3 times. If you can tell, if they don't have any type of backer or anything, they're probably going to die if any card is in attack mode. Okay. Now, Adoration's effect is that he can target one face-up monster that your opponent controls on one face-up hero monster you control, except itself, and it can lower the attack of one by the attack of the other. So your opponent's monster will be dropped by the attack of the other hero target. So essentially, if Stratos was on the field and they had a Blue Eyes White Dragon, you drop Blue Eyes White Dragon by 1800 after targeting Blue Eyes and Stratos. So this would be considered the alternate win condition. This isn't the way that you technically plan to win out, because you plan to win out by blowing them up with Anki, by attacking multiple times, getting mass changes, transferring out, and just going for game. But if you don't have that, let's say you don't draw a mass change in your opening hand, right? you can go for the polymerization play, which is almost guaranteed if you go through, which is guaranteed essentially if you go through the combo of Ferris to increase to Vion, which means you then have, if you do math, you have to have 3 monsters for Trinity. You'll have Malicious, Increase, and Vion on board. Even then, you can go for Adoration because you still have 2 monsters and you have a target for it. That's what makes decks like this so very strong. They have many ways that they can get through to their game plan to make sure that they get what they need done on the field. So now, after that, we found out our first win condition, which is this Ferris, Increase, Vion. You hope to have a match change in your hand. If not, you polymerize into either Adoration or Trinity. So we talk about this. Astro, what happens if we don't get the ideal situation? What happens if we go first? What happens if we have to wall it for a turn? What can we do? Now, if you're playing against another explosive deck, like if you're playing heroes versus heroes, it's kind of a coin flip, and I know a lot of people are going to dread that, but sometimes if you don't get your way on the first go, you're lost, right? If you play heroes and heroes, you're not going to have a good time. The first player is not going to have a great time. They're going to kind of hope that the other player who's going turn 2 breaks out and doesn't get to blow them up, okay? But we have things that we can do to set up because we have cards that, and this is where draw power comes into the game, right? So there are 2 hero monsters off the top of my head that I can think of with draw power. One is leagues better than the other. So we'll start off with the worst one and we'll talk about why one is worse than the other, right? We're going to talk about Elemental Hero Bubbleman, right? Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Bubbleman's effect, it's because you never see this dude. I totally spelled bubble wrong. You guys aren't familiar with this effect because you never see him because his effect is not helpful, but him and another monster that we're going to go over do the exact same thing. So let's check this out. If this is the only card in your hand, you can special summon it from your hand. When this card is summoned, you can draw 2 cards. Wow, Astro, that's draw power, right? We like that. 2 cards, great, good +1 because you do plus minuses. Those are important, but once again, that's more advanced stuff, and we'll talk about that later. You get +1 because you play Bubbleman, that's your -1, and you get 2 cards, that's your +1, or your +2, right? -1, +2, +1. But this is the restriction. You must control no other cards and have no other cards in your hand to activate and to resolve this effect. So you get to draw 2 or whatever, but basically you have to be in a situation where Bubbleman is the only card that you possess, period. And off of that, if you draw 2 cards, it's kind of a miracle if you get anything off that anyway. We're going to talk about the other hero with the much better draw effect that works much better in the deck, and that would be Destiny Hero Celestial. Now, if you haven't seen Bubbleman, I know you guys have seen this guy, okay? This is a very strong card in the deck because you can run it at 1, right? And his effect reads, when this card declares an attack, you can target 1 face-up spell card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. We don't really worry about this. This comes up in a little bit in certain matchups, but you really won't be seeing a lot of this. And then here it comes. Well, you have no card in your hand except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard. So that means if it was sent to the graveyard that turn, you can't use it, so you have to wait till the next one. You can banish this card and 1 Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard, draw 2 cards. You can only use the effect of Destiny Hero Celestial once per turn. So, now I know what you're thinking. Astro, that's another +1, right? You use Celestial, and you get to draw 2 cards, right? Well, here's where we get into specifics. Bubbleman's restriction is much more restrictive than Celestial's. Celestial, just like Stratos to Ferris, Ferris can only grab a monster that sets itself into the Spell and Trap card zone, and it's only useful if the monster is set for the Spell and Trap card zone. If you have 2 Increase in your hand, and the only card that you can send to the Spell and Trap card zone is Vion, Vion can't special summon itself out the back row. So you're stuck, right? Just as if you draw Bubbleman at all, and you have any other monster or card on the field, this includes your back rows. If you have 1 set card and you draw Bubbleman, his effect isn't going to activate, right? Celestial just requires you to have no cards in your hand, and you have to banish a Destiny Hero along with Celestial. And if you remember, if you use Polymerization and you thought ahead for your turn 1 play, because this is you'll really only dump Celestial if it's turn 1. You'll have Malicious in the grave with it, and it has no other use because there's not another Malicious. You only have 2, right? So you use 1 you banish 1 to get the other malicious on board. You use that malicious for whatever you need it for. You use polymerization to make either Trinity or Adoration. And then your next turn, after you, because you dump Celestial off Vion, or well, because you dump Celestial, if Celestial's in the graveyard, you get to banish the other malicious to draw 2 cards if your hand is empty, which usually in this deck will be the case. If you have to go to a turn 3, or if you do get to turn 3 with these guys, usually your hand will be empty. So now we look into the idea of what does our second turn, or what does our first turn look like? Because, right, Vion dumps this to get the polymerization if you're going for the kill turn 1, but if you want to set up and you want to think smart about what you're doing, right, you're going to want to send Celestial so that you have draw power for the next turn, because you're going to try and empty out your hand, hopefully, so that you can kill on turn 3, because you obviously can't attack turn 1. So that should explain to you, that should be a decent explanation of why Stratos' search is better than Vision Hero Ferris' search. They're both very strong. Don't let this confuse you. Stratos' this is not me saying that Ferris' search isn't good. Ferris' search out for Vision Hero increase is great. Makes it a great ending card. But the fact that Stratos can grab any hero from your deck at all, and if you know, yes, Vision Hero, Elemental Hero, he can even grab himself, actually. That's the crazy thing. There's no restriction on this besides it has to be a hero monster. Destiny Hero Malicious, Vision Hero Increase, Destiny Hero Celestial, Vision Hero Vion. He can search the whole deck, whereas Ferris can't grab Stratos, he cannot grab Malicious, and he can't grab Celestial, right? So that's how searches aren't the same, and also how we have Celestial's great effect to banish 1 card. They both do the same thing. They both end up with 2 new cards in your hand off the top of the deck. You get draw power from both. It's just one is going to happen way more often than the other. So now we're going to move on to what can we do to make sure that the deck is consistent and trying to get to what we want to get to, and how we can cure the problems that certain decks have. We have no way to get rid of BACKROW, right? We have no way to attack the back line, and we have no way to make sure that cards like Wall of D, which is why I put it in here, cards like Wall of Disruption or common battle traps like Dimensional Prison or Sakuretsu Armor, cards like Fiendish Chain, Stop Effects. How do we stop those from getting to us? How do we stop those from getting us out? Right, because that would be the counter to our win condition, right? If they have BACKROW to stop our effects here, if Ferris' effect never pops off to get increase, we don't have any more plays past summoning Ferris. You guys can get what I'm saying? The deck can be stifled if you're going turn 2, and they have cards set up to stop you, essentially Floodgate, Trap Holes, things like that. So that's why we run cards like, we run cards that help us attack BACKROW. We have BACKROW hate, right? So as you guys see, Cosmic Cyclone, which allows you to pay 1,000 life points and then target 1 spell trap card on the field and banish it, right? We have cards like Hate. Well, you can't run Hate Trunade because you have 2 Vion, but if you want to run 1 Vion, you can run 1 Hate Trunade. We have cards like Galaxy Cyclone, Night Beam, Cosmic Cyclone, things that allow you to just destroy or disrupt BACKROW, or if you think just trying to generally break your opponent's board the best way that you can before you start, so that you don't have to worry about anything. So if you're starting hand, the ideal starting hand, right, is you got to look at it. Your ideal starting hand would be something like a Cosmic Cyclone or a Night Beam, Galaxy Cyclone, anything that can destroy the BACKROW so that you can remove any threat to stopping your plays. You want to make sure you remove any threat to stopping your plays, right? And if you build your deck, right, if you're building a deck and you see a weakness, you have to make sure that you compensate for that weakness without trying to essentially, you want to make sure that you're not crutched or your Achilles heel is exposed as least as possible, right? So with heroes, right, the BACKROW is a threat. We want to try and run cards like Night Beam, Cosmic Cyclone, Galaxy Cyclone to try and remove the threat to our Achilles heel. Makes sense, right? We don't want to expose our rear to get hit in the back, right? Because that's how you lose games. If you don't have outs to your outs, you'll lose. Which is why we build our decks. This is why commonly you see triple Cosmic Cyclone, because they want to see it first. They want to make sure they can at least get a chance to get rid of the important card that can stop their combo, so that they can blow through the rest of the board. Right now, we're talking about an aggressive deck like Heroes. There's other cards that have different ways of doing this in terms of like when we talk about control decks later, or burn decks, or types of mill decks, or just generally balanced decks with multiple ways to get rid of their outs for the win con. They have different ways of doing it. Each different deck style has a different way to go about making sure that they can get to what they need to make sure that they win the game, right? So we're talking about a deck like Heroes, a very aggro deck. Like I said before, this is kind of like like I said before, it's a very all or nothing deck. So you want it to be set up so that you can all or nothing and make sure that you're getting all and hitting nothing as much as possible, if that makes sense. So I am going to actually throw what I would do with these last 2 cards. Is you can even do, where you at, buddy? You can throw this and this. This card's really good. Night Beam's very good because if you get in your opening hand, they can't respond to it. They cannot respond to it. So if their card is set, if it's a card that can be activated, it's just gonna get destroyed unless they can chain it to something else that they have in the field. But we'll talk about that when it comes to strategy. That's also another later video. That's more advanced stuff. But for right now, you just think, okay, like cards like Night Beam where they can't respond to it, it's just locked. It's there. The card's gonna get destroyed. There's no activation time. It's done. Once Night Beam hits the field and you target the card, it's going through. Done deal. Okay. Now, that pretty much provides the general overview of what it means to build a deck in terms of the beginning. I know that was kind of a lot, but if you watch the video maybe once, maybe twice, I'm sure you guys can understand. You guys will understand it's not a lot once you kind of break it down like we're going to. We're going to try and break it down to as simple as possible. And we're going to go over all the different styles of decks and how we can make sure that we get ours through to make sure that we're building our decks. Now, I understand what you guys are thinking is, guys, if you're trying to make a unique deck, but you want to make a rogue deck, right? Like a rogue deck that you can play in the ladder that'll still be successful. These tips that we're using to make these meta decks are what are going to help you get to that point where you can build rogue decks. Because once you understand what makes meta decks click and what makes them work and how they roll and how they can steamroll through like Heroes, or how they can lock down the board and hold it down like the new Witchcrafters, or how it can essentially bully you through situations like the Evil Eyes, right? You'll be able to use these in your deck building to make sure that you can build the strongest deck possible, even if you don't have the strongest cards possible. So take these with a grain of salt. Make sure that you're not just looking at the fact that we're playing Heroes, but you're looking at the fact of what we're going for, right? We have our search cards, we have our draw power, we have our special summon engine, we have our engine cards, right? You want to go through and you want to think of it in a manner like that, right? And now, well, you want to think about your win cons as well and how often we can get to that. If you guys were keeping track, and I know you guys probably gotta don't get lost in the sauce. There's multiple ways that we get to this, into this, into this, into this, or we get into this that can end up attacking and swinging for big damage, and this that can end up swinging for a lot of damage very fast. We already talked about the combo leading to 3 monsters on board for Trinity, in Ferris, into Increase, into Vion, into Malicious, which will then give you 3 monsters to target for Trinity in case they did multiple special summons in attack position, right? Which can go for a game. That could be game right there. A lot of the time when Trinity comes out, if you learn how to run the deck properly, Trinity is game, right? That's the way it works. Trinity is game. Adoration, you can even go into things like if you have multiple monsters or if you have a mass change. If you also noticed, Adoration is dark and Trinity is dark. So they can go into Anki. Woohoo, right? Another link into the win condition, right? So you summon, you can find ways you can do, you can go Ferris into Increase, into Vion, into Malicious. You fusion summon Increase and Malicious because they have the least amount of attack. Vion has the highest at 1,000, right? You summon Adoration, you target their card, you target Vion, they lose 1,000 attack. Essentially, Adoration becomes 3,800 because you have to account for the attack loss. And you can go ahead and swing for game from there. If you have a mass change, even better, because then you can, after you attack, play the mass change, swap out one, either the Adoration or the Vion, and you can swing again for another thick 2,800. And it kind of just, when you're building decks, you kind of want to think, I like to work my decks backwards, right? And as you guys can see, I kind of had the extra deck set up first because we want to work our deck through Anki. We want to work our deck through getting to Anki as often as possible, as fast as possible. And how do we get there? Through working backwards, right? Trinity is a dark monster, right? Adoration's Dark Monster, which means that even if we have to go for the alternate win condition, if we have the win condition in hand, right, we can still work through it, right? Or even better, we can increase our potential for plays. Like if they have 3 monsters on board, instead of wasting triple Anki attacks on 3 different monsters, you can just fusion summon into Trinity. Trinity can swing for 1 blah blah, 1 attack position monster, 2 defense position monsters, which once again he's at 5,000, still a lot of damage that he can put down. And you can mass change him into Anki and swing for 28. A lot of the time, if you clear a board in even 1 monster in attack position, that's lethal. That's lethal a lot of the time. Okay, so now we're back. Hopefully after those clips you guys can see how this deck does work to be explosive and how it can go from a losing situation to killing you literally in all of about 3 cards. This is also worth noting when it comes to Duel Links, how your skill can be important. We'll touch more on this when it gets to different types of decks, but like essentially when it comes to things like unbricking a hand, like how you guys saw, I used reinforcements to get rid of the malicious and I ended up pulling the Ferris off of it, right? This is also important, and this is also an important part of deck building too. And as you guys come across skills, you'll realize that some are just better than others, right? Like reinforcements is better than in a hero deck, reinforcements is better than draw sense fire. But if you're trying to get to Stratos, maybe draw sense wind wouldn't be that bad, right? But you kind of just want to we'll take everything a step at a time. We'll talk about skills at a different time period when we get more to the advanced stuff, because that kind of techs into like different ways you can make things work and how different cards, how they interact with each other. For right now, I hope this guide helped prove useful for you guys when you guys go out to build your own decks, whether you build heroes, cyber dragons, witchcrafters, Shiranui, Neftis, whatever you're feeling. I hope that this can find you well. I hope it finds you informative. If you do, please drop a like on the video. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you guys would also like to, you guys can visit me when I stream on my Twitch channel, which will be somewhere on the screen. My editor will put it somewhere, I'm sure. And I hope you guys have a great day. Get out, play some Duel Links.